everyone, today we're gonna talk about Ruby. So, if you guys hear about what Ruby is, what comes to your mind? Pokemon game. What the heck? Dog's name? Really? Old. Rail. Your neighbor? Why your neighbor? Gem. Shiny red. Girl? A Minecraft new mineral? Oh, really? So, let's learn what Ruby is. Ruby is an interpreted, high-level, general-purpose programming language which supports multiple programming paradigms. It was designed with an emphasis on programming productivity and simplicity. In Ruby, everything is an object, including primitive data types. It was developed in the mid-1990s by Yukihiro Matsumoto in Japan. Oh, Matsumoto is actually my favorite actor's name. Oh, side story, guys. Ruby is dynamically typed and uses garbage collection and just-in-time compilation. It supports multiple programming paradigms, including procedural, object-oriented, and functional programming. According to the creator, Ruby was influenced by Perl, Smalltalk, Eiffel, Ada, Basic, and Lisp. So all the old language. Let's read about the history, guys. Ruby is actually, their slogan is Ruby, or sorry, their logo is Ruby. The early concept, Matsumoto, has said that Ruby was conceived in 1993. In 1999, post to the Ruby Talk mailing list, he described some of his early ideas about the language. Was talking to the colleague about possibility of an object-oriented scripting language. Knew Perl, but did not like it really because it had a smell of a toy language. Oh shoot, he's dissing Perl, being like, oh, that's so easy. The object-oriented language seemed very promising. I knew Python then. Oh, Python also existed such a long time ago. But I didn't like it because I didn't think it was a true object-oriented language. OO features appear to be add-on to the language. As a language maniac and OO fan for 15 years, I really wanted a genuine object-oriented, easy-to-use scripting language. I looked for it but couldn't find one. So I decided to make one. So he just dissed Python, being like, you're not actually a true object-oriented. And then he dissed Perl, being like, that's still like a baby toy language. So then he decided to make his own. So Matsumoto described the design of Ruby as being like a simple Lisp language at its core, with an object system like that of Smalltalk. I've never heard of Smalltalk, so this might be an interesting language to talk about. Blocks inspired by higher order functions and practical unity, like that of... Wait, what the heck does that say? I like wrote over it. Oh, utility, sorry. Practical utility like that of Perl. The name Ruby originated during an online chat session between Matsumoto and Keiju Ishizuka. This sounds so Korean, sorry guys. On February 24th, 93, before any code had been written for the language. Initially, two names were proposed, Coral and Ruby. Matsumoto chose the language because it was the birthstone of one of his colleagues. That's so simple. You should have picked Coral. Coral sounds better than Ruby, I guess. But then if you connect it with Ruby on Rail, that'd be also, it makes sense. So early release, the first public release on Ruby was announced on Japanese domestic news group. Oh, they have a domestic news group. Subsequently, sorry, I can't speak English right now. There were 3 more versions of Ruby was released. The release coincided with the launch of the Japanese language Ruby list mailing list, which was the first mailing list for the new language. Already present at this stage of development were many of the features familiar in later release of Ruby, including object-oriented design, classes with inheritance, mixin, iterators, closure, exception handling, garbage collection. Oh. So it's still going on till this day. And then they're talking bunch of all the updates that they did 2000, 1999, and then 1998, 1997. Python is the bomb. Yeah, but he's dissing Python. Kind of want to talk about, maybe next week we could talk about small talk, because I think that'll be interesting. Do you understand what you read? What type of question are you asking me for that? Like, how am I supposed to respond to that? Anyways, going on, Ruby 1.8, 1.9. There was another big update. Seems they added block local variable. Oh, I don't know what this is. Additional lambda syntax, and then hash literal syntax using colons for symbol keys. And then Ruby 2.0 was intended to be fully backward compatible with Ruby 1.9.3. But they added a bunch of new methods, da-di-da-di-da. And then there's also Ruby 3, released on Christmas Day 2 years ago. Oh, not bad. It's known as Ruby 3x3, 3x3, which means that programs would run 3 times faster in Ruby 3.0 comparing to Ruby 2.0. And then another goal of Ruby 3.0 is to improve concurrency and 2 more utilities. Fiber schedule? I don't know what this one is. Libre? Is that how I'm supposed to read this? An experimental reactor facilitate the goal. What? That sounds so confusing. So I guess they're making things more complicated as time goes on. And then Ruby 3.0 introduces RBS language to describe the types of Ruby programs for a static analysis. The block variable is just the feature that allows the variable to lock into blocks. Oh! And then the latest update was released on Christmas Day in 2021, including all these, just-in-time compiler, YJIT, developed by Shopify. Also, I guess Shopify uses Ruby. And then new debugger is also included. There are some syntax enhancement and other improvements in this release. Da 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 da. Oh, he's Matsumoto. Hi, Matsumoto. So then let's see how this got started. So Matsumoto has said that Ruby is designed for programmer productivity and fun, following the principles of good user interface design. At the Google Tech Talk in 2008, he stated, "I hope to see Ruby help every programmer in the world to be productive and to enjoy programming and to be happy. That is the primary purpose of Ruby language." And then he stressed the system design need to emphasize human rather than computer. Often people, especially computer engineer, focus on the machine. They think by doing this, the machine will run faster. By doing this, machine will run more effectively. By doing da 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 da. But in fact, we need to focus on humans, on how humans care about doing programming. Well, he's a good guy. He cares about language more. So Matsumoto has said his primary design goal was to make a language that he himself enjoyed using by minimizing programmer work and possible confusion. Oh, what other confusion do they have? He has said that he had not applied the principle of least astonishment. I don't know what this principle is. Oh, new principle I learned. So, I guess he must be a very he must be like an influencer, because so many people are praising on his philosophy and that he's, seems like a chill guy. And he must be like programmer idol. He must be like BTS of programmers. 2010 apps used Ruby at the time. But I guess now it changed to what, Python? People are using Python more? He also defined it this way in the interview. Everyone has an individual background. Some may come from Python, someone else may come from Perl, da 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 da. Then they come up to me and say, "I was surprised by this feature of the language. So Ruby violates the principle of least surprise." Wait, the surprise of least surprise? What? The principle of least surprise? Least surprise is not only for you. Is not for you only. Ruby also has been described as a multi-paradigm programming language. It allows procedural programming with object orientation or functional programming. It has support for introspection, reflection, and meta programming, as well as support for interpreter-based thread. Ruby features dynamic typing and supports parametric polymorphism. So these are all the features that Ruby supports. Does some meta classes, dynamic typing, duck typing, expression, dynamic reflection, literal notation for arrays, default argument, 4 level of variable scope, garbage collection, first class continuation, da-di-da-di-da. So syntax of Ruby is broadly similar to that of Perl and Python. Well, that's what he kind of described it, right? That does object orientation. Class and method definitions are signaled by keywords, whereas code blocks can be defined by either keywords or... So one of the difference from Perl and Python is that Ruby keeps all of its instant variable completely private to the class and only exposes them through accessor method. Unlike the getter and setter method of other languages like C++ or Java, accessor method in Ruby can be created with a single line of code via metaprogramming. However, accessor methods can also be created in the traditional fashion of C++ and Java. Oh, what is accessor method? This is something that I want to try. Because it seems that it makes the instant variable. So I'm guessing these are like when you create a variable like int and stuff and it makes it private. Why do you want it private though? And then it only exposes when you use the accessor method like alt writer and alt reader. Oh wait, that's attribute writer, attribute reader, etc. You want it private so it can't change by accident? Oh, is that helpful though? And then Python's property descriptors are similar, but comes with a trade-off in the development process. If one begins in Python by using a publicly exposed instance variable and later changes the implementation to use a private instance variable exposed through a property descriptor, code interior to the class may need to be adjusted to use the private variable rather than the public property. It sounds so complicated. But why isn't other language doing that like Python and Ruby? Perl, sorry, not Ruby. Because Perl's doing that. I feel like they would do that though. If it's such a good feature, don't you think others would already have copied it? Python can't because it wasn't built for it? So these are implementation of where Ruby has been used. So Matsu Ruby interpreter. I might need this. Original Ruby interpreter is often referred to as Matsu Ruby interpreter or MRI. This implementation is written in C and uses its own specific virtual machine. The standardized and retired Ruby 1.8 implementation was written in C. I thought they would have a section for Ruby on Rails. And then they talk about the libraries. There's Ruby Package Manager, which is called gems and can be installed via command. Got most of them. There's a bunch of gems on rubygems.org. I think this is cute that they named it. Many new existing Ruby libraries hosted on GitHub. Obviously, we know about that. And then Ruby Application Archive, which hosts the application, documentation, libraries for Ruby programming, was maintained until 2013 and then transferred here. So if you want to use Ruby and you're looking for a different package manager, you would get, I guess you use rubygem.org. It's more for writing faster code than static typing. Now C Python might be able to statically type. Oh, the trade-off is it's easier to introduce bug. If it's private, that means it has to be very intentional when you want to do something. So Ruby on Rails is framework. Because that's also they just add, so it's a framework using Ruby, and I guess so on Rails is why it's causing it. How am I feeling? I want to look at their own site. This happens often where I just don't understand what Ruby is, what the language is. Oh, look at this. Output, I love Ruby. Says, I love Ruby. Puts output. Oh, so there's say and put. So it's focused on simplicity and productivity. It has elegant syntax that is natural to read and easily write. How is their documentation? So they have install Ruby etc. Resting when sick is rough. Yeah, I I feel like I'm wasting time, so I got so anxious and I ended up just kind of editing. Rails is the framework and Ruby is one of the language, so it can maybe be like Go on Rails. Because if they make a framework for Go, then I can say Go on Rails. Oh, that's cute. Yeah, Ruby on Rails is like React framework, right? I think. Because when I first started tweeting, a lot of people always mentioned Ruby on Rails and React at the same time. So I'm guessing those are two frameworks that I should have used when building the website. But so how thorough is their documentation? Whoa. So do you guys read this when you're trying to program? Oh, Nihongo desu ka? Read me in Japanese. Wow, 쩐다. Wow. Ruby no. And then there seemed to be like a bug page, so trying to report if there's any bugs. Use an alternate format, variable among types. So is this where it has all the different packages for Ruby? Wow, Tencent Cloud, yeah. Ooh. What the heck? Why is it all Tencent? Oh wait, I can try Ruby, guys. Let's try Ruby. Got 30 minutes, give Ruby a shot right now. Okay, run. Time, do. 3 times, do, print, welcome, end. Welcome, welcome, welcome. 2 plus 6. 1. So it's kind of like MATLAB, isn't it? Try doing other math. 4 times 10. 5 minus 12. 3 divided by 4. Well, why does it give everything out together? Is this correct? 40. What? Why is it 0. Oh, it does the last one. Ah, so it doesn't do multiple together. And then... Oh, look! Look! That's what I was saying. Did you notice that if you type more than one formula, you only saw the answer for the last one? What is going on? Ah, see? Try this. Okay, copy paste. Oh. Type your first name. Boss. You formed a string from the letters of your name. Whoa! Boss start reverse. Ah! Ooh. This really reminds me of MATLAB, guys. Okay, guys, let's talk about conclusion. So how do I want to conclude Ruby? It's simple. I think their syntax is pretty simple. I tried like 10 minutes, like 5 minutes of Ruby, but I think it's pretty simple. Self-explanatory. Not sure where it's still like being used. Because only thing I remember about Ruby is Ruby on Rails. I think that's the most popular one, right? So that's the one that comes to my mind the most. But this being used at other platforms, I'm not sure where else you could use Ruby. So, and then if you guys are interested in learning a 1995-year-old language, that sounds weird. Born in. What other ways can we conclude Ruby? Ruby code also tends to read pretty nicely, almost like sentence. Yeah, that's what I got when I did the samples, is that it's easy to read. And I feel like you could organize it nicely. Does this sound like a good conclusion? I think we can end here. So yeah, I actually enjoyed Ruby. I want to try Ruby on Rails, the framework, to build a website next for my next website if I ever get to build one. Because I feel like this is much easier language than other language that I've done. But we'll see. Probably when I actually get to the language, then I'll be stressed out being like, what is this stupid thing that I'm working on? So that's that. That's Ruby for you guys. Yay!